I saw this position on Backgammon Studio, and then it was in a match, and then I thought I would just adapt it to a money game. So we are blue, we're on roll, holding a 2 cube. So what's the cube action? Um, so I guess that I had a kind of a quick look and scan and saw that there are 5 checkers, and I thought, well, if we miss once, we're going to be okay, and that's a likely scenario, so it's got to be a recube. Um, and I wasn't even sure about the take, to be honest. Not saying that it wasn't a take, but I just wasn't sure. So, what does the computer say? The computer says it's not a redouble by 0.027. So it's close, but it's not a redouble. And if you look, what I'm trying to focus on for my own selfish benefit, as well as anyone else who happens to be watching, is that Blue's winning chances here are only 63.9%. So let's try and break this down and see why this might be. Um, so I figure there are 3 scenarios um, that can happen from here. And then from those scenarios, there are other scenarios. But let's try and keep it as clear as possible. So scenario 1, which for some reason I didn't see, and this is probably the easiest thing to see. Scenario 1 is that blue rolls a 4-3. And if blue rolls a 4-3, then he loses immediately, because this will be the position. Just checking that that's right. So 4-3 will be forced. White will be on roll, of course, holding a 4 cube. And we know that the 3-roll position is a big pass. So 150. And I went through the 3-roll in my last video. It's not quite a 3-roll position because we've got 5 checkers each. But anywho, okay, so that's the scenario 1, which is basically easy to analyze. Now, before I go on to scenario 2, we should know that in backgammon that there are 36 dice rolls, and we know that there are 21 combinations of different numbers on the dice. So there are 15 non-doubles, and there are 6 doubles. You can go through them, you can list them out in a book, and you'll get 21 different possible rolls that you can roll, but 36 permutations, 36 ways that they can happen. Now, the reason that's important is because we know that 4-3 is the only number that misses immediately, and one number out of 36 we should always remember is 5.5%. It's actually 5.5% reoccurring, I think. So what does that tell us? It tells us that 5.5% of the time we lose, or that our opponent has at least 5.5% winning chances. So we need to set aside our 5.5% on our tally, and then see if we can add any more for our opponent. So we've already found 5.5%, let's say, of our opponent's 36% winning chances. Let's get the cube back on our side to 2. Scenario 2 is where you miss once now, your opponent rolls, and then you miss another time. In this position, if you don't take at least one checker off in all of your rolls, then you lose. I hope that's right. So for example, let's take scenario 2 is going to be a roll where we don't take 2 checkers off. And it's not always going to be a roll where we don't take 2 checkers off. Sometimes can be a roll where we take 2 checkers off, so that complicates things. But let's just go for a roll where we only take 1 checker off. So by my calculation, there are 5 rolls that only take 1 checker off here. 4-3, 4-2, 4-1, 3-2, and 3-1. So let's give ourselves a 4-2. We're going to have to play a 4 is forced, and we're going to take 1 checker off. Then let's say our opponent rolls a non-double. Now we get down to a position like this. Still remember we're in scenario 2. Now we've already cubed, so let's put the cube on our opponent's side on 4. Now we've missed once. Now we can see that we're down here. We cannot miss again. If we miss again, our opponent wins automatically. It's going to be an enormous recube and an enormous pass. How many rolls miss here? Well, basically we can see that lots of things with 4s and 3s are going to miss. So I actually... No, I don't want to save it. This is the position after the 4-2. And I listed the rolls there. So if we roll now a 4-3, a 4-2, a 4-1, a 3-2, and a 3-1, then we miss and we lose. Now we said that one number of the possible 36 is equal to 5.5%. So this is 5 numbers. So what we do is we multiply 5.5 by 5, and we get approximately 27.5%. So in this scenario, our opponent has at least 27.5% to start with. Notice, of course, that even if we do take 2 off, he can still roll a double. Everything but a double 1 will still win for him. So it's going to be 27.5% and more. And we can check that by clicking on the cube action, assuming we didn't cube, which was correct. We can see that we've actually got lower winning chances than before. We have 62.8% as opposed to 63 point something. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's still a recube because you have some market losing sequences. So this is still within scenario 2. Now let's go back to the initial position. Let's go for scenario 3. So you think, oh, I'm going to take 2 men off, I'm going to win automatically. So, well, let's give, for argument's sake, let's give us a 6-4, which will be played 1 off, and then 1 will go to the 5 point. Now, let's look at what our opponent's winning chances are from this position. So assuming we correctly didn't cube, what does our opponent need to do in order to win? Well, he could either roll a double 2 or above now, and then we fail to roll a double 2 or above, or he can just not roll a double now. We don't roll a double, and then he's got a second chance to roll a double. If you tot all that up, you see that our opponent's still got 24% winning chances, and this is scenario 3. So what have we got totting up? We've got scenario 1, 5.5%. We've got scenario 2, where he's got where we roll one of the 10 bad numbers, which was 37%. And then we got scenario 3 where we didn't even roll we rolled a good number and our opponent still got 24%. So if we go back to the initial position, put ourselves on roll, we should be able to see that just from looking at scenario 3, that even if we roll one of our good numbers, our opponent has 24%, that our opponent is going to have way more than 24%. How do we calculate this more exactly than roughly? Well, we see that if I'm going to go to dice distribution, and then I'm going to try and capture this in another window, just bear with me. And there we go. So in this position we can see the rolls that we have and the corresponding equities after the roll. Now, if we know that, if we take scenario 3 as our starting point, and we know that we only have 75% after scenario 3, then we can say that scenario 1 occurs on 5 dice rolls, which is 25% of the time. So we could then possibly say, and this is not exact, but it's trying to get more to a precise figure. If then we get to a position where our opponent has 37% around 27.5% of the time, then we know that our opponent's going to have, let's say, maybe 33, 34%, and then we've got the 5.5%, which we can add, and then we get, let's say, 39%. And as we know, if we don't double, our winning chances are 36%. This is assuming you don't double. Our chances of winning in a cubeful game, assuming that you can cube and that your opponent can recube if he takes when you cube, then the winning chances are 36%. So taking scenario 3, 2, and 1 and the number of times that they happen, you should be able to get down to 36%, around there. Now, I wanted to go back to, just to crystallize this a bit more, go back to a scenario that occurs after scenario 2, which is the 4-2. So you're left with a position like this. What you see is that even when you miss once, you're not in a particularly good spot. Your opponent will have a roll, of course, and you're down to a lower winning percentage than you were before. And if you can able to extrapolate that in your in the 5 dice rolls or 10 times, because they will happen twice each of the 4-3, 4-2, 4-1, 3-2, and 3-1, that you will get down to this position, then you are able almost to shortcut and know that, well, basically, if you're going to be missing, when you miss once with your 10 dice rolls, that you get down to a position that's only 63%, then you know that, or you'd be more convinced that you don't have as high winning chances in the initial position as you thought. So that is basically me trying to break down a sort of a 5 roll and a 5 roll. And to recap, the idea is that you can only miss twice, and that means you can only miss you can only not take one checker off on 2 dice rolls, and if you don't take at least a checker off on um, on every dice roll, then you will lose. And so if that is a something that can be held in the mind in a 5 checker versus 5 checker, then that might be something that helps. Okay, I tried my best. I might well have a further look at this position and see if I can break it down a bit more neatly. I know it's a bit rough, um, but something that was very interesting to me, and I hope it was to you. And please just, if you've got any tips for me, then I'm delighted to read them in the comments box. And also, please like and subscribe. Okay, bye.